Hi, and welcome to Ruby's Ask Me Anything office hours. My name is Dan Marek. I'm the Director of Plant Based Culinary and Development for Ruby. And each week we come to you to answer any culinary questions you have that are course related. If you want to ask a question, all you have to do is scroll down on the right hand side where it has the box that says Add Question Here. Type in your question, hit the Add button, and it'll go to our moderation staff to make sure that it fits within the criteria. Because I'm plant based, I typically only answer plant based questions. So if you have a quick question about marinating pork or something like that, you might want to wait for a different host for this until next time. One thing I did want to mention too is we have our 40% off sale right now for Memorial Day. It's our last day of the event, so you might want to check that out. If there's a course that you've been interested in through Ruby, you can always check those out and get a pretty big discount on them. With that being said, if you do enter one of the questions on the right-hand side, you can always hit the heart icon on the questions that have been submitted, and it will move it further up into the queue. Now let's get started. Our first question is from Susie. Susie says, any ideas how to keep parsley, cilantro, and etc. from dying every week? I seem to throw them out more than I use them. There's actually a really simple trick for this, Susie. When you get home from the grocery store, you want to treat your herbs like flowers. So when you get them home, cut off the bottom of the stems of the cilantro or the parsley, then put them into a glass of water, and then take the produce plastic bag that came from the grocery store, put that over the top, and then put them into your refrigerator like that. If you do that, I guarantee they will last more than a week in your refrigerator that way. In fact, they might even last a little longer. You will need to empty out the water at least, every 5 days and replace it with fresh water as well. Try using filtered water instead of tap water so you don't have any salt or anything from water softeners in there as well. So it would be the same water that you drink is what your plants will drink. So that's the best way to be able to keep herbs in your refrigerator and have them last as long as possible. Karen, hi, Chef Dan. Can you please confirm if I'm on track thinking that tapioca starch is the same as tapioca flour? The different product is called cassava flour when the whole root is used. Or am I confused? Yes, you're completely right. Tapioca starch and tapioca flour are the same thing. They're both derived from the cassava root as well. They're basically dried down and turned into a flour. Now, the flour is usually really, really fine. The starch might be a little bit thicker, but it's pretty, indistinguishable for most cooks to be able to use them back and forth. So they are the exact same thing, and they work great for thickeners and like tapioca pudding kind of consistency. So you are not confused. You're totally right on that. Depending on where you are in the world, they might call them something a little bit different, but in the States, they typically call them flour and starch. Maurice, Dan, the course has been great. I have several really good hot sauce recipes that most Texans rave about, and friends who don't traditionally like hot sauce. What would you advise for a side hustle on hot sauces? Well, Maurice, there's a lot of things you need to do in order to sell food to the public, especially when you're bottling something like that. So you might want to look at a food safety course to be able to make sure that you're hitting the criteria for food safety. But there's also licensing, and then depending on where you are, we don't actually have a class for this, but depending on where you are, there are certain restrictions put forth by the by food safety, in the state, but also in your city as well, too. So you'll definitely want to check in to see what the health inspectors, criteria are in your city, and then also to be bottling products and being able to sell them as well. So that's the first thing I would say right away is make sure that you're meeting all the criteria of hitting that you're hitting all the criteria of selling packaged food as a business. There's a pretty big learning curve on that. So you might want to start small and just look at friends and families to be able to sell. And then maybe talk to some other vendors, like maybe go to a local farmer's market and talk to some other vendors that are actually selling a hot sauce or something like that and see what they did to be able to start out. That way it'll help you with some of those, food service laws in your local area as well. And figure out how to be able to take that. So if you're going to do that, wonderful. Start small and then kind of slowly work your way up once you get the learnings. And don't dump everything in kind of one batch right away, right? So, make smaller batches, sell them to family and friends. Think about expiration dates on them as well too, and definitely think about your food safety laws in your local area. Janine, can you suggest the best way to add flavor to tofu with minimum sodium? Yeah, so most marinades actually work great for this, and you can do all kinds of different marinades that don't have sodium in them. A lot of the ones I like to do usually have a tamari or a soy sauce, but you don't have to have those. Absolutely don't have to. Some of the marinades I've done in the past were like, like I did like a lemon tofu, where it was lemon peel and lemon juice, along with some oregano and just a little bit of water. Tiny bit of vinegar in there as well too, to be able to add just a really lemony kind of flavor to tofu. I've also done the same with tomato, like consomme in the past too, where I made a tomato consomme, um, blended it all up, and then marinated the tofu as well. So those are a couple different great ways to be able to do that. I do suggest using fresh herbs in your marinades to be able to get a really big flavor out of that, and soak them a little bit longer to be able to absorb all the flavor that you're going to get, and you're not using sodium with it as well. So that's probably the best I would give you for that. Is just use a good marinade with a big flavor, and you don't have to use the sodium at all. Janine, can you offer some recommendations for sauces with low sodium seasoning for Butler soy curls? Yeah, so for doing different soy curls or TVP and stuff like that, you don't really need to have a low sodium, or you don't need to have sodium in those. I use them like TVP or soy curls a lot for like tacos and stuff like that, depending on who the audience is. But for that, it's just cumin and chili powder to be able to add to it. Maybe a little bit of paprika as well. Now, if you're doing, that's a great way to kind of start out. But if you're doing something more Mediterranean, maybe a little lemon or oregano to be able to add into it. Doing some garlic powder and onion powder is a great way to be able to look at those too. So you can add some bigger flavors to those. And then you basically just kind of cook them down in a little bit of water. You can saute them in oil if you want to, but I usually just do the herbs in there and the spices and herbs, mix it all up and do the water so it basically rehydrates them. And then maybe at the end, a little bit of oil on the bottom if you don't want them to stick, but you can also pull them before they stick too. So I hope that helps, Janine. Mary Jean, I love citrus but have an allergy as my mouth blisters. Ooh, what can I use as an alternative to citrus? So, depending on what you're looking for in this, if you're looking for the acidity of a citrus, you might want to look at different vinegars. There's a huge variety of different vinegars out there besides just your regular white distilled vinegar. You can go for an apple cider vinegar, a champagne vinegar, a rice vinegar, balsamic vinegars. There's all kinds of different vinegars out there to be able to taste from, and they work wonderfully in different cooking techniques. Now, if you're looking to be able to get some of the kind of floral notes off of, the citrus, you might even want to try some different herbs or different spices, like maybe even sumac would probably be a nice one that has kind of a different kind of edge on it. That would work for that. But I think really what you're probably looking for is the acidity in those. So I think that the vinegars would probably be your best bet. There are some places that specialize just in vinegars. And in fact, I've seen tasting rooms of vinegars before where you can go through and just taste all kinds of different ones. And I suggest experimenting with a couple to see what it is you're looking for. If you're just doing a simple, kind of a salad or something like that, you can try one day and try a different one the next day. I hope that helps out. Annette, is there a protein powder that you like to cook with? I typically don't use protein powders. Usually, even when I was helping coach, different bodybuilders and stuff like that, we weren't really using protein powders a lot. What I would actually do is do like a high protein kind of a thing, like a tofu or quinoa sometimes even. and cook them, basically blend them up into a blender and then add them into other foods with shakes is typically how I do that. But for protein powder, I don't typically cook with a protein powder at all. It's more that's more when I think of the protein powders, I think of those more as like shakes and things that are people using to be able to up their protein for workouts. And that's usually in a format of a milkshake or a smoothie or something like that. So that's the times that we would use those. And the plant-based versions, tofu works really well. Quinoa can be a little gritty sometimes, so sometimes you can they get stuck in your throat a little bit, even if you're blending them down. So, tofu might be your best bet. And when you are doing that, try a silken tofu to be able to get the best texture for it. Sue, um, hi, Chef Dan. I'm looking for some quick grab and go foods for the summer for my 6-year-old granddaughter. Thanks for any suggestions. Yeah, so quick grab and goes for my kids, 6 years old is right between my two. And grab and go for the summer is always kind of okay, what can I make? And I usually try to make it ahead of time to be able to make it so it's really easy, simple things that they can grab literally on the way out to the pool or to sports events or whatever they're going off to. Um, you know, like what we call roll-ups are probably a good idea where it's just tortillas and then you have your sometimes we'll put like vegan cheese in there or maybe a mustard and then some different greens like spinach or tofu and then kind of roll those up and then have those just kind of rolled up so they can literally just take them and eat them on the go. It's a little fancy, but I love making onigiri, and one of my daughters loves onigiri, and onigiri is basically it's a Japanese street food. It's in the shape of a triangle, but it's sushi rice basically, kind of packed in, and you put seaweed around it. And the way you make it is it stays together really easy, so you can just grab it on the go, which is really awesome. And I've tried a host of different seasonings for that. So I'll basically make like a genuine just sushi rice that you would make sushi out of, but then I'll add other things into it. And that might be furikake, which is like a seaweed sesame mix, or I might add a little sesame oil to it, different herbs, great different things to be able to kind of switch that up depending on what you have at the moment. They actually love radish in it as well, or the chickpea. I guess we call it the chickpea tuna salad on Ruby, but they do a version of that as well. That's just kind of on the inside of it. Those are a couple of the great things. I also love doing granola bars. To be able to look for things like if you make granola bars at home, you don't have all the kind of chemicals and stuff that are added into them. Sometimes you have to do the store bought granola bars, but having a homemade one is always nice too. And for being grandkids, you might want to include them on some of these things too. Always a fun thing to be able to have to be able to help with your granddaughter in the kitchen. Probably first and foremost, thinking about it, the biggest thing that they go for is fruit. They're always going for strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries are kind of the big ones. Once spring and summer start to hit, just because they're more affordable. I don't always buy those in the winter, unless they're frozen. So oranges are kind of our go-to, and apples are a go-to in the fall and winter, and usually just keep the oranges cut up into, so they can has the skin on them, but it's easy to cut. And they just kind of peel them back. And the apples I just keep washed in the fridge, and whenever they want them, I have one of those tools that's kind of like a star shape where you can just push it over the top of the apple and it cuts it all into pieces for them, so they can do it themselves pretty easy. So those are a couple tips that I would suggest for you, and that should be a pretty good start for you. All right. Maria, hi, Chef Dan. I've not seen plain kombucha being sold in stores in a while. Is there a lot less demand for it now? Well, Maria, there are a lot of different kinds of kombucha now. Even when I was growing up, kombucha was kind of limited to maybe a couple different flavors, right? Most of the stuff you found was kind of at home, like home, recipes where you'd have your standard kombucha and somebody would be growing the SCOBY on a shelf somewhere. And then they would mix it in with a bunch of raspberries or strawberries or some sort of fruit. Now that there's there's so many different brands out there, everybody's trying to look for different flavors. And it is harder to find a plain kombucha. You can usually at least find one basically in the whole section, but the flavored ones are definitely more popular because people want to be able to have I don't want to say mask the flavor of the kombucha, but it basically adds that sugary element to kind of hide the vinegar slash alcoholish kind of flavor to it. So you definitely can find it. You might just have to dig a little bit farther. And it really depends on your store too. If your store doesn't have it, you might want to ask if they'll start carrying it to be able to purchase it as well. And if you haven't, you can also try making your own kombucha. We actually cover that in our plant-based pro course as well on how to make a kombucha. All right, Andy, I enjoy fruit smoothies, but would like some veggie ones. Can you advise on some tasty green smoothies? Yeah, so first and foremost, Andy, it's going to take a lot of greens for your smoothies because I always think about if you've ever seen the viral video where the raccoon gets the cotton candy and then puts it in the water and it just kind of melts away. That's how I feel my greens do when you put them into a blender, or if you're putting them into a saute pan. You take a huge amount of them and they just kind of condense down, and all of a sudden there's barely anything there. So I always like to do a variety of different greens. Spinach is usually kind of one of my staples. When we're not growing it, we have those big tubs that we get from the grocery store of spinach, and buy as much locally as we possibly can, just because I feel like there's a lot more nutrients in those too. So spinach is kind of one of the staples. If I want it to be a little peppery, I might put a little arugula in there. If I'm putting an acid into it, I might put kale or collards into it, and the acid being like a vinegar or like a lemon juice or something like that into it would be great. Now, depending on what you want, if you want the fat content in it as well too, you can put a little bit of avocado into it, or you could use an almond milk as well to be able to have that into those. And then just think about the vitamins that you're trying to get out of this for the smoothie as well. The fruit smoothies have a lot of sugar in them, but if you're adding just green smoothies to them, that's wonderful. So you can take the standard fruit smoothie like you normally make. That could be like water, apple, orange, maybe strawberry or something like that. Blend that up with a big, probably like 2 or 3 handfuls of spinach to be able to blend down into that as well too. You can get a lot of greens to be able to pack in there, and that's always a great way to be able to kind of sneak your greens in to smoothies. Melissa, I've recently been enjoying and marinating and roasting portobello mushrooms and adding them to a bowl with other items. What are your favorite marinades for mushrooms? Well, that's great. So, um, you know, balsamic is probably one of my favorite marinades for mushrooms. I love the way just kind of the depth of flavor that comes with it. I usually will make my balsamic, kind of mixed with other things. One of the things I love to do is take like a dried fruit, like an apricot, and blend up the balsamic with that and let it sit for 24 hours, usually with some sort of herb in it. Kind of take your pick on what you want to do for those. But balsamics are a wonderful one to be able to do with those. Doing like a lemon pepper is always really nice too, where you'll take the lemon peel or and then squeeze some lemon juice into that as well too. And I'll usually take a pepper blend, not just black pepper, but I'll do, like pink peppers, and you might do a little, red pepper, like flake into it as well too, to be able to put those in and let them marinate out on those as well. So those usually work out pretty darn good. Susie, is it best to keep potatoes, onions, and lemons in the fridge or out of the fridge? That's a great question, Susie. So, my general rule on this is I've worked in grocery stores for a long time. Think about the way you buy it in the grocery store, and that's the way you should keep it at home, right? So, potatoes and onions, you're traditionally kept in cool, dark environments to be able to let them stay as long as possible. So, like your root cellar, right? So potatoes and onions, I keep in a pantry that keeps cool as well. So you don't want it next to, like a hot refrigerator or anything like that, like a motor or something like that. If your pantry's right next to your fridge, but try to keep it in a dark, cool place. Lemons, I usually just keep on my countertop in a fruit basket, with the other items. Just don't keep apples in your fruit basket because apples tend to give off a gas that ripens other fruit very quickly. So if you're ever in a jam and you have some avocados that are really hard, you can always put them into a paper bag with an apple, and you'll see in 24 hours they'll be very soft. So potatoes and onions in the pantry, dark, pantry typically, lemons on the countertop. And I usually do the same with my avocados. I don't refrigerate them until they, are starting to get soft, and then to slow that process, I put them in the fridge. But tomatoes always stay on the counter as well. Same with most peppers as well. I usually keep them on the counter, jalapenos, poblanos, even red peppers and some mixed mini peppers. Sometimes those need to go in the fridge a little quicker than the other ones. So, all right, Tony, when making my vegan Alfredo sauce, I usually add lemon juice, and the sauce cooks from the fresh lemons. Sorry, having a tough time reading for some reason today. Is that good, or should I add it after it cooks? It tastes amazing, by the way. Great. Glad you're liking the Alfredo sauce. I typically add it kind of right in like right as I'm cooking it. But you can also add a little like lemon zest at the end too. Maybe even as a garnish on the top would be nice too. But if it's incorporating into your cooking, it's going to be just fine in there. You're not going to lose the flavor or anything. You're not cooking the acid out. So you could do it at the beginning or the end. Either way will work just fine. But I do suggest putting a little lemon zest at the end just for a nice pop of flavor when you dig into it. Victoria. Hi, Chef. I'm starting a small terrace garden. Besides a tomato plant and some herbs, which I already have, can you recommend anything that would work well in a small, sunny space? Yeah, so I love to garden. I have a pretty big garden spot. And I think the biggest thing I always recommend to people is grow what you eat a lot of, right? So if you are a big fan of basil, grow a lot of basil plants. If you know that you're going to eat rosemary quite regularly, buy a rosemary plant to be able to, have it and harvest it as you need. Tomato plant's great. Tomatoes get really big though, most of the time. So a tomato plant might not be the best for, the terrace garden, depending on how big your terrace is. If it's pretty big, that's great. Go for it. I, you know, have more tomato plants than I can count at the moment. And I love getting all the variety of tomatoes from them. But yeah, the biggest thing I would say is plant what you eat most of. And a lot of people forget that, like you can just buy your plant from, uh, you know, a hardware store or a gardening place or whatever, or sometimes even a grocery store, and put it into a pot. And then you have, say, your basil plant, right? But I always tell people to buy seeds at the same time you buy that plant so you can plant some seeds at the same time. So that way, when your plant comes to harvest, it's time to harvest it, you still have another one that's coming up to be able to back that up. A good example of that is usually like spinach is a good one to do that with. Radish is another one, which is a really quick yielding plant. So you can usually 30 days, you can have a full radish growth time as well too. But for lettuces like butter lettuce and spinach, usually if I put a start in, I'll also plant seeds at the same time, just so it's alternating. And I'll get the most out of those batches as well. So that's not an exact question for you, Victoria, but it's really kind of a follow your heart or your stomach, if you will, and plant what you want to eat and what you're looking forward to having to be able to get fresh. Herbs are wonderful because you can go and grab those anytime you want to. Mark, if I cut mostly vegetables, would a 6-inch Nakuru work best, or would a 6-inch Victorinox be better? I read lots of great things about the Victorinox. Mark, I'm not really I'm not familiar with the Victorinox there. So I can't really tell you either way. So if you mostly cut vegetables, if a 6-inch knife works best for you too, then a koru is typically a flat end on the end and kind of curves over. Um, you know, that I've used many, many times and it's worked great for me, but that might not be everybody's, bag. The Victorinox, I'm guessing, is probably kind of a normal chef knife-ish kind of look, and that works great because you can do your rocking. And Patrick's saying coming in, you said it's a Swiss Army knife, Patrick? Oh, they're the ones who makes. I see. So yeah, they probably have a variety of different kinds of knives to be able to do that with. But really, at the end of the day, Mark, it's whatever feels best to you and what feels best in your hand. So, either one, try to pick one up and see which one works best for you. And think about the motion of what you're doing on the table as well too, because most of the time, just a standard size chef knife is curved in the end, so it'll go along and curve on your cutting board as you're cutting like this. And that kind of helps you to guide and go faster. If that end is cut off, typically there's a little bit of a curve on the end, but you're not getting as much of that. It's more of a chopping motion at the same time. So really kind of depends on which motion you like to do better, but really which one works best in your hand. All right, Tony, what herbs are good for growing indoors if I don't have a garden? Indoor gardening is great. Sometimes you do need a light source for them, but for growing inside for herbs, basil is one of those. It's actually a tropical plant, so it's a one that survives pretty well inside. Just make sure that it's getting good light from the outside, or you have some other artificial light to be able to give it a light source too. In the wintertime, I have like a little grow kind of kit that has a light built into it, and I'll grow all kinds of things. I typically will do butter lettuces in that. We also do spinach. We tried tomatoes once, but they just got way too big for this little grow kit. If you have a place to be able to string up your tomatoes and have a space for it, that's wonderful. They'll grow inside just fine as long as you have a light for them. But, typically, the herbs that I would grow inside are going to be basil. You could do dill pretty well too. Oregano will last well inside along with thyme. Um, but yeah, that would probably be kind of the extent of it. If you're looking for other things like garlic and stuff like that, those are typically like root-bound vegetables that you'll wanna do in kind of a bigger setting. Um, so yeah, that would probably be what I would recommend. Basil being kind of my top contender that I literally have growing in the house or outside the house all the time, and I plant a lot of basil to be able to be companion plants for my tomatoes. Well, great. Thank you guys for joining us today, and I hope we answered all your questions on the Ask Me Anything office hours. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.